because that's what it looked like during the drawdown. And I'm just saying that there are hundreds of people involved in this that are going to be impacted by this particular scenario, and it's not going to go easy. It really isn't. And people like this brave young lady that preceded me and stood up here and showed you the emotion that is there with all of us that live on that river, and how we feel about it, and how it impacts how we feel about Hillsborough, about Newmarket. It's important, I think, for that to be an element in the report in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, just so you know, that is, we're fully aware that there's potential tax implications.
When we originally got proposals, a lot of the proposals were much bigger than what we're at now. A lot of them did include quality of life and recreational impacts. However, we don't have the funds to do those at this point. The only funds we had is the $81,000, so that's why they weren't done at this point.
Understood. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Elliott Circle, Newmarket. Two questions. So one of the original drivers behind this whole study and the original petition by the individual who brought it forward was reducing the flood flows or the flood elevations upstream of the dam during the large flood events of 100-year storm. So good study with limited budget, by the way. But what you've shown, I guess, by those profile charts is that there was minimal change in the flood elevation of the 100-year storm upstream. And I'm just curious how much of that limited change is due to the size of the opening of the Veterans Bridge, if that's a restriction in itself, and if that's the case, you know, if we were to spend the millions of dollars by chance of improving this dam and to pass, 10,000 CFS, we still have that limitation at the bridge, and all that money really doesn't have much effect in the end. So that's my first question. The other question I have is, we know that DOT has been proposing to upgrade 108 and raise the road elevation in that area. I just wondered, I know it wasn't part of your scope, but if you have evaluated it, or if not, is DOT going to evaluate it?
Sure, I think I can take a crack at both of those. So to start with your first question, which is the impact of the Veterans Bridge. We didn't do a specific analysis to say if you took the Veterans Bridge out, you'd get an extra 3 or 4 or 5 feet. But I think your point is correct in that the bridge itself is substantially limiting not only the bridge and the narrow opening, but the bedrock underneath the bridge is substantially limiting the benefits that you're getting from removing the dam as far as the flood reductions. I guess I'll leave that up to the readers of the study to determine whether 1 to 3 feet is beneficial or not. But it's certainly not the maybe 10 or 15 or 20 feet that maybe others. It's going to be tough to know because there's been a bridge there for so long. But let's say you did open that bridge from a 60-foot opening where it is right now, and that's 60 feet, not necessarily in the direction of the flow. The true opening is really closer to the range of maybe 53 or 54 feet. But let's say you open that even up to 100 feet. We don't know what the bedrock is underneath that. So even if you open that bridge opening even more, your gain could still potentially be restricted by if the bedrock is,
high up.
Right, if the bedrock is high, unless you plan on blasting red bedrock, your gains would probably still be limited. So going at your second question on the Route 108 bridge, we were asked to simulate essentially the existing conditions. We're not, we have provided our model to DOT. Maybe they'll be doing some work on that, but we were not asked to look at that, and so we're not having any, we have not really done any official runs looking at anything along those lines that, is anything we would trust or have vetted.
Okay, thank you.
Sampson, I live at 71 Corporation Hill Road in Sutton, New Hampshire. I'm interested in this project for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that my ancestors built the original dam there. I think that I have a lot of angles which I approach this from. One of them is that I believe that what essentially has been for 350 years a renewable energy resource is being effectively converted into an energy sink, which otherwise I will refer to as Route 108. And I think that the study has danced around the problem and hasn't really identified what the real problem is. You've talked many times about the impact of the flow split and how if you reduce the dam, more water will run down over the dam, and it complicates the calculations as to the overflow and the freeboard. I don't see it that way. When the dam was originally built, the dam that's there now, they used 4 feet of flashboards, which raised the elevation of the reservoir to approximately 26. There is a dam upstream. It's tipped over now, a small dam about 1.5 feet high, which is at about an elevation of 26. The obvious reason for putting that there is that when the people at McAllen Dam were maintaining flashboards, the water was running back into the Oyster River. And now Route 108 is obstructing the natural flow, the natural flood release of the Lamprey River by maintaining itself a dam. Route 108 is a dam, by my calculation, that's approximately 7 feet high and about 3,000 feet long. And that is the problem that is causing all of the residents in the Lamprey area above the Veterans Bridge to be flooded. And I don't see why it isn't being studied. I think this problem is DOE's fault, and I think that they should step up here and admit that there's an inadequate culvert system passing under 108, which causes flooding in the Lamprey River watershed, which should be addressed. And all the money and time that's going into studying this project, if a quarter of it were used to install significant sized culverts running under 108, a lot of the flooding would be dispersed before it ever happened. Because what's happening now is water's rising up to the roadbed elevation of 31 and spilling over at the height of the storm. If you relieve that flooding at elevation 26, you might not ever get to that elevation unless you had a complete Noah's Ark situation. But what man has changed the two watersheds and the interaction between them? What you need to do is return the situation to the natural flood flows so that the Oyster River can vent the very high flows in the Lamprey. And that will, for all intents and purposes, prevent the flooding in Newmarket. Thank you.
Dick Lord, 85 Bennett Road in Durham. I'm at the headwaters of the impoundment. I'm also on the Lamprey River Advisory Committee. I see from your daily average flow mapping that the entire back part of the moat is dewatered. Did you do any studies for the August low flow, for how much dewatering there would be under those conditions?
We didn't look at the August low flow. We looked actually at the September low flow because if I here, let me.
But do you have a dewatering map for that?
Well, just to put them,
Yes, we do.
just to give a rough idea, we looked at 10 CFS, and the lowest flow on record is 2 CFS. I don't think it wouldn't look that much different than probably the map we had.
So up here on the wall, we don't have it, but if you look in the main report, we did map out that 10 CFS, and what you'll see is that essentially the entire Moat Island area is dewatered at that flow.
Yes, and this concerns me greatly because that backwater is a nursery for a major amount of habitat. There are osprey nesting back there. There are endangered turtle species back in there. It is a duck nesting area that's protected from a lot of human intervention. People can canoe around there. It's not an island. Moat Island is no longer an island because of the way that it's sedimented at the upper part of the Lamprey, but it's because it is an isolated area that people don't often visit. It's a major wildlife nursery. The Piscassic, which turned into a huge mud flat, has also been a very productive area for waterfowl. And so I think that part of the study that needs to be done, if you're going to look at the impacts of dam removal, should really include a pretty major natural resource inventory to see how much destruction of habitat will be involved. Have you calculated the area that would be dewatered versus the area with the present dam?
I was here originally when we had the proposal. We had a meeting where a person stood up for 45 minutes and sold a bad bill of goods to us, claiming that the Mother's Day flood and the flooding down at the end of the hill here was all caused by the dam. Well, it wasn't. It was the Piscassic overflowed, and that's where that came from. It was also, the ground was saturated. I have a well for my garden, and it was 6 inches from the top. So everything was saturated. And the people behind this aren't the poor people that did get flooded out. It's the people that are, and it's a loosely knit group that wants to take out the Exeter Dam. They took out the dam in Stratham. They've been taking out dams all over the country. So we have a resource here. That dam, up until probably the 40s, created electricity. Nobody wants to do anything about that. Look about that, because that's not the way it was worded. Well, I believe that this thing should be cut off at the bud and stop now. So my question to you is, if no more funding for this dam removal is approved by the taxpayers, does this all go away?
Received a letter of deficiency on the dam. That's the state telling us that this deficiencies in the structure of the dam because of safety issues. That's one path. During the town going down that path and hiring Wright Pierce to do the work, there was another path that was brought up, and that was the vote to remove the dam. So the town was going one way. It was approved to remove it. So even if we don't fund anything, the state can come in, and I apologize to the state, but this is true. They can come in and say, look, you have a deficiency with the dam. It's your dam. You need to fix it. So we can still be forced to fix the dam.
Well, this study, surprise, surprise, wants more studies. And as I said, I only had 5 minutes before because the other guy talked for 45 minutes.
Yes.
But if this town looks at it and puts the money to fix this dam, and what are they going to send in the National Guard, martial arts? Are they going to blow up the dam, or send in
no? But there's ways.
There's
ways that the state sets our tax rate.
Well,
and they would fund
that's what
the
we ought to
project
look
through
at.
it. So
we ought to look to fix that dam instead of wasting money on study after study that isn't going anywhere, and not taking the resource and make electricity or any other thing.
And again, as I said earlier, the way we set this project up was that the data that we can use from this would also go to help us with the studies for this fixing of the dam. So we're trying to use the same penny twice in 2 different studies. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't see you behind the podium. I'll get you right after. Nope. Yeah.
Lynn Badger, Cushing Road in Newmarket. I think you had a pedestrian survey. I'm just curious what the results were from that.
The pedestrian survey was done by the Public Archaeological Laboratory, where they call it a pedestrian survey. Essentially, they drive around to different locations during the drawdown to look at the area. That's what they call. That's what archaeologists call. It's like a windshield.
It's a windshield.
No.
And you were asking how they liked it.
It's a drive-by. It's a drive.
That's archaeological speak.
I'm Julian Smith. I live at 246 Packers Falls Road in Durham. I've lived on Packers Falls Road for 49 years. I'm going to have a question in a bit for the experts, but I want to make a few comments. As a member of the Durham Town Council for the last 9 years, I went through a very similar situation. Durham went through a similar situation after we received a letter from DES, a letter of deficiency having to do with the Oyster River Dam next to 108. And it was a huge political megillah. And I do not envy what you as town administrator here are going to have to go through in the political realm. At our council meeting last week, our town administrator startled me by referring to a public hearing, this public hearing tonight, entitled McAllen Dam Feasibility, an Impact Analysis public hearing. And my immediate reaction was, the McAllen Dam is very feasible. It's right here. There's been a dam here in Newmarket for hundreds of years. The impoundment behind the dam is stable. And removing the dam will create a very, very unstable condition, environmentally, and I would think politically and socially and culturally. The question I have for the experts is this: having walked along various parts of the Lamprey River after the drawdown, the recent drawdown, I noticed the extensive mud flats as you got closer to Newmarket. And as someone who loves beavers and who has facilitated the return of beavers to a small brook in Durham, I will say the beavers are going to be very happy. The aspens and alders and all kinds of fast-growing soft hardwoods are going to grow up, and the beavers are going to be taking them down, and there are going to be dozens, if not hundreds, of dams along the Lamprey River. I live on a little brook that has, there are 3 beaver dams on my property and more than a dozen downstream, and this is less than half a mile long, this brook. You're going to have dams along the tributaries that will be exposed, and the next 100-year flood, we have them every few years for people who are flummoxed by that term, the next 100-year flood is going to wash down thousands of cubic feet of muck and sticks, etc. The beavers are going to be delighted, and Newmarket is not going to be delighted by the mess that may just jam up under the Veterans Bridge. Removing the dam would be a terrible mistake, a cultural and political mistake, and this impoundment is historical. I am for the people who live along that impoundment, and for the fish that swim in the impoundment, and the birds that eat the fish that swim in the impoundment, etc., etc., etc. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm a dam safety engineer with the Department of Environmental Services. I've been involved in this project since about 2008. The department, the Bureau of Dam Safety, obviously their first choice is to work with the dam owners to solve the problems. Our first choice is not to go to fines to try to, in the long run, it doesn't help anybody. So, again, to work with the process. If the process does stall, we do have a enforcement agency within the Department of Environmental Services that will eventually enforce the rules of the state of New Hampshire. But again, first choice is to work with the dam owner to resolve the deficiency.
Given the name of the river, but I don't know about other migratory fish, because we don't know I've read the same thing. There was a first falls that the dam was built at, but we don't know exactly what the geometry of that falls looks like underneath the dam. So I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I mean, and the problem is, we went in there with echo sounders and probes and everything, but there's a legacy dam there too, and so with all the probing that we can do all the probing we want, we don't know what's under those sections
Structures.
of the legacy. Yeah, there's large timber crib dams there, and who knows what's underneath there. So I mean, in the report we did make sure to mention that there are concerns at certain flows if the dam were to be removed about fish making it up there. Again, we really don't know because there's a high level of uncertainty, but there's there's the potential based on the gradient of the river between there and the bridge that it could prevent some types of fish from getting up there. And in addition, if you look back up at that falls at the head of the impoundment, even during the drawdown, you could see that was turned into a rather steep area. That could be another potential concern for blocking certain types of fish.
Right. All I know is river herring. They spawn best in slow-moving, deep waters. And if the dam's removed, then that's kind of wiped out. So, okay, thank you. Thank you.